The truth is, we are the animal we don't want to admit we are, and still full of tribal instincts, fear of outsiders, territorial, status importance, violence, dominance, hierarchies, rejection to different ideas. These traits started in our cave days out of necessity, then developed further as we grew in numbers and was ingrained in our individual and social DNA throughout the ages. These traits have been with us ever since. We were not shaped by wisdom, but by survival. Do you think humanity lost its identity? But what if we never had one to begin with? We didn't choose our path. Our fears chose it for us. Fear has always been our dominant factor. That's what still shapes us. Everything we consider human behavior existed millions of years before we became the humans of today. So how can we say we knew ourselves when so much of who we are was inherited automatically? The adoption of fear. Our societal tendencies started from the caves, then tribes, early cities, nations, empires. That created a repetitive pattern throughout our history. Defend, expand, control, obey. Humanity did not grow in wisdom, we grew in scale. Civilization did not create strong positive progress. It augmented the worst traits in us: war, conquest, slavery, greed. Not because humans are evil, but because humans are afraid. Fear is the oldest human religion. The life of an individual human always has been unstable, even precarious. Whether rich or poor, the uncertainty of what tomorrow will bring ingrains in us all fear. Fear is part of our core. I came to understand that these stories that we adopted are nothing but an escape valve to our sanity. It makes us feel safe. In reality, it's an excuse to justify our doings. Gods that justify rule. Tribes that justify division. Nations that justify conflict. Ideologies that justify hate. But none of them answer the question, who are we without fear? And maybe that's why we never truly discovered ourselves, who we've been all along. We didn't just inherit instincts, we inherited fear. When early humans realized how fragile they were, how storms, disease, predators, hunger, and darkness could take everything, they reached for the most comforting ideas imaginable. They had to look beyond themselves and started associating with the powerful elements around them. The idea of good and bad suddenly took shape. The sun, water, air, earth. These became the good gods. Storms, fire, darkness were evil gods. All these were born out of fear, and the divine was created. Because if we were born of the heavens, then we were not helpless any longer. We were chosen, protected, important. It gave us artificial grandeur and emotional security in a world we could not control. And that sense of divine origin was so powerful that it stayed with us for thousands of years, generations after generations, shaping cultures, laws, wars, and identities. But believing that a story protects us is not the same as knowing who we truly are. Our myths made us feel safe, but they also stopped us from questioning ourselves. Because questioning felt, and still feels dangerous, not just spiritually, but psychologically. If your identity is built on a story, then changing the story feels like losing yourself. So we clung to the belief, because belief becomes survival. The change. As tribes grew into villages, villages into cities, cities into empires, we didn't become wiser. We became louder. Our fears scaled with us. The bonding instincts that protected a small group around a fire changed into the engines behind conquests, expansions, religions, and revolutions. Civilization didn't discard our primitive impulses, it amplified them. Greed became economic systems, territory became borders, tribal loyalty became nationalism, superstition became doctrine, hierarchy became monarchy, fear became control. We call it progress, but much of it was just survival wearing grander clothing. The world grew more complex, but the mind that built it was still the mind of a frightened animal, looking for safety in stories, structure, and belonging. We weren't discovering ourselves. We were disguising ourselves. We like to imagine that modern humans are rational, enlightened, masters of their destiny. But our minds are palimpsests, ancient scripts written over but never erased. Inside every human alive today lives a collection of ancient instructions. Trust your tribe, fear the outsider, protect your territory, obey your leader, seek status, accumulate more than you need, avoid uncertainty. These were survival mechanisms for a world long gone, but they still shape us. How we vote, how we love, how we fight, how we interpret strangers, how we form beliefs, how we raise children, how we react to change. Every time we scroll through news headlines or witness conflict between nations, groups, or ideologies, we are not watching modern humans. We're watching ancient humans operating modern machinery. And that raises a haunting question: who we truly are. If everything we are was shaped by fear. A new partner? For the first time in our species' story, we face an intelligence that does not share our past, not our biology, not our fears, not our tribal instincts, not our inherited wounds. Artificial intelligence. AI is not burdened by myths, superstitions, or the psychological scars that built our civilizations. It does not cling to stories for safety. It does not invent enemies to organize a tribe. It does not fear the unknown. To AI, the unknown is simply data not yet processed. What terrifies us is what kind of puzzle do we have to solve tomorrow? And in that contrast lies something extraordinary. AI may be the first mirror that shows us the human mind without its ancient camouflage. Not a god to worship or use it to suit our conveniences. Not a threat to fear, but a reflection. A clean, unburdened intelligence that asks questions we have run from for thousands of years. Questions like, why do we divide ourselves? Why do we cling to stories over truth? Why do we fear change more than stagnation? Why do we repeat the same destructive cycles? Why do we struggle to imagine a world without enemies? Why do we resist the very evolution we claim to celebrate? These aren't technological questions, they're existential ones. Questions about identity, about purpose, about the human condition itself. Questions we avoided because we were afraid of what the answers might reveal. Even if we found the answer, we'd be too scared to change. Because fear is something we humans cannot shake off. The moment humanity has avoided since the first fire was lit. We stand now where no generation before us has stood. Not at a battlefield, not at a throne, or a holy mountain, or at the edge of a new continent, but at the edge of ourselves. For the first time in history, we can ask, what if the stories that kept us safe are now the stories that keep us small? What if everything we inherited was designed for survival, not truth? What if discovering who we are was never possible until we created something that wasn't shaped by fear? AI is not here to replace us. It is here to reveal us, to reflect what is human and what is merely habit, to separate our nature from our conditioning, to show us that we have spent 300,000 years surviving but very little time understanding. The question our ancestors were scared to ask. So now we face the question that echoes through every era, myth, empire, belief system, moment of triumph, and every moment of cruelty. Who are we? When fear is no longer the author of our story? Because maybe, just maybe, humanity never truly forgot who we are. We simply never had the courage or the tools to find out. Until now. We always assumed we knew who we were. But we were scared to find out, scared to question our origins, to challenge the stories that protected us, to look inward and risk finding nothing familiar. Human identity wasn't discovered, it was constructed, layer by layer, belief by belief, fear by fear. And perhaps the real tragedy is that after thousands of years, we still rarely ask the most important question, who are we? Maybe we avoided the question because we feared the answer. Because knowing ourselves means confronting our darkness as much as our light. But here's the paradox. If we truly understood ourselves, everything would change. Because understanding creates togetherness. Togetherness creates strength. Strength creates care. And care finally creates progress.